This is King. I'm your host of this very educative podcast on how you can make the most for your health insurance, life insurance, and everything retirement planning. Today, I'm actually excited, and I know a lot of people are excited, or at least anxious, or anxiety is the word of the day. Well, there is so much to be anxious about. But I know you'll be thinking like, what are you talking about? Yeah, the anxiety is right there. I know it's election season. Everybody's on their on the edge of their nerves with all them crazy stuff going on. Well, I'm actually here today to tell you about something which is even more anxious or exciting to me than all the election noise that you're hearing about, and that is got to do with your health insurance coverage. The reason is because tomorrow is November the 1st, right? So that means we are entering into the annual open enrollment window, which is probably the most critical decision you would make for the rest of your year 2025. From tomorrow, November 1st, you would have to find a plan. If you are on a plan, you would have to find something that would keep you on the same plan or at least make it close to what you have for next year. Usually, that's almost impossible to get just because insurance companies always change plans every year. So, this is very important why you should stick around. I'll give you the hack of the day at the end of this very show. So, please don't go away, stick around. And by the way, the sponsor for this very initiative is my own insurance agency. We do help people, folks like you out there, to make sure you're getting the most out of your health insurance coverage. So if you would need any help with that, please do well to check us out at localquote.com. I will also add some details on the description of this podcast. So please do well to check that out so you can find out what we actually do. And let's dive in. So here's what we're going to look at today. I'm going to try to really approach it from the layman standpoint, right? So we'll look at what is actually the Affordable Care Act, also or AKA Obamacare. That you probably must have heard enough of it over the election season. I'm gonna basically talk about that, and then we'll look at something called the Advanced Premium Tax Credit, which I think is probably the most important aspect of that law and that whole uh, um, policy, to so to say, and also something that is called cost sharing reductions. So we're looking at Obamacare or ACA as it's abbreviated, Affordable Care Act, and we'll also look at the advanced premium tax credits and the cost of sharing. And I would also try to break down some really basics for you, for those who are not very familiar with the insurance jargons. As a matter of fact, that's what this whole podcast is about. We break down all that jargons so you can make sense of it all and make some very informed decisions to stay healthy. So let's dive right in. What is actually the Affordable Care Act? Now, this is the law that was passed to make what we now know as Obamacare, right? And that law basically said insurance companies will have to now go through this federal government program that will offer insurance to everybody without any restrictions, right? You don't have any restrictions per se. They can deny you coverage for health reasons, which I think was the groundbreaking aspect of that law. That gave a lot of people insurance. So if you did not have insurance from an employer or you did not have insurance privately, this was like a medium where the federal government came in and said, okay, here's an option. If you can go in there, look for something and it works for your budget, we will be happy to work with you to make sure that you have insurance coverage for yourself and your family, obviously, that if that were the case. So that is really what that is. Now, why am I actually doing this? Again, that's because we are in the open enrollment window, which starts November 1st through December 31st. For those who would like coverage to begin on the 1st of January, obviously there are other dates that would allow you to go into 2025 and still get coverage. If you were, for example, not picking up coverage before that deadline, you might still have some states that would allow you pick up coverage till February, but that's no guarantee, so I wouldn't even want you to rely on that. Now is the time, November 1st through December 31st for you to make that decision. Obviously, there is other rooms for you to make changes if you were not open or during an open enrollment, which I would leave for another day. But we want to really focus on why this is important right now. The most critical thing is this is the moment, right, where you go ahead and make your choice for what coverage you would like for yourself or your family, if included, if that were your situation. And I'm going to try to break down here what the advanced premium tax credit is. It's basically more like a subsidy, right? The government says, okay, if you do find coverage and it's costing a little much more than your budget can afford, we will use what we call your advanced premium tax credits to pay for that coverage. So they would give you some money to make the cost for that care that you are looking for cheaper on the marketplace. So that basically is what that is. And then there's also something called the cost sharing reduction. This basically says, okay, if you have a certain condition, your family, certain size or certain income level, we will subsidize your coverage and make it more affordable. So those are the two things that I really think we want to pay attention to going into this conversation today. So again, it's advanced premium tax credits and your cost sharing reductions, because that's really all what that comes down to, right? Because you would typically go on there if you did not have the advanced premium tax credit nor the cost sharing reductions. The most of the people who are on an Obamacare plan today would probably not be able to afford it. That's implying a very simple fact. So that is really probably the most important aspect of that policy and why it's so critical that it stays there. Because if it's no longer there, I'm sure most people would lose their coverage. Because that program basically says, okay, if you had an insurance plan that was going to cost you as a family of four, for example, which is typical, it could be average of about 1,000 to 1,500. They will come in and say, okay, we'll subsidize that for you, and you would probably only be paying like 500 or 300. Or if you're just a single person, the plan that would typically cost you like 300, they might actually bring it down to maybe like $0 a month. So that is really what that does. So who qualifies for this is another very important thing to really dive into. If you are employed and have coverage through an employer, you are not eligible for these benefits, right? That's because the government already assumes you already have someone who's taking care of you. Caveat, there are some exemptions, okay? And I will talk about that, which is actually the hack of the day. We will talk about that at the very end, so please stick around. If you obviously have insurance through your employer, you would not qualify for advanced premium tax credits. So that's really, I think, the most important part to remember there. Now, if you do not have insurance through an employer or anyone else or any other form of insurance that you would, say, oh, I got coverage, then you are eligible for the advanced premium tax credits or to get advanced premium tax credits to buy insurance on the marketplace. It could either be your marketplace for your state or the marketplace in this context. I'm referring to the healthcare.gov. I know a lot of states have created their own marketplaces, so it's interchangeably referred to as marketplace. If you hear me use that in this conversation, it's just to say that I'm referring to the exchange where you can buy insurance either from your state or from healthcare.gov, which is run by the federal government. Going forward, what is the cost sharing reduction? So cost sharing reduction here simply means that the government says, okay, we see that you are having a certain family size and we're going to subsidize your costs. So we make the plan that would normally cost you twice as much a little bit cheaper. So for example, if you were going to have a plan like a plan that will cost you a silver plan, for example, right? They will give you the coverage for a silver plan, which is usually the average of about 70-30, right? If you know the insurance method plans, which I will talk about subsequently. But there are basically the four metals that you will know. You have the bronze, the silver, the diamond, and the platinum. So if you had like a diamond plan, they would offer it to you at the level of a silver plan cost. So that's really what they call the cost sharing reduction, right? So you would get a silver plan for the cost for say like a bronze plan. Basically, that's what that is. It's simply saying we're subsidizing the cost of the plan for you to get a higher coverage at a cheaper rate. So those are the basically two things that need to be very, very, you need to pay attention to going into the marketplace for shopping when you're shopping for insurance. So they would typically be stated on there. So during the process, they would ask you about it. And we would certainly, with those questions they'll ask you, would tell if you qualify for advanced premium tax credits and how much you would qualify. I just don't want anyone to assume that you're not qualifying because of your income. I do know that because of COVID, they had opened up the premium tax credits for people who make even over $400,000 a month in a year. So I think, and I wouldn't want anyone to exclude themselves by assuming because they make enough money they don't qualify. So it's a policy. You qualify for it, you can use it. That is really important. The other aspect that I would like to look into here is the fact that you have to obviously be filing your taxes, right? So you should be straight up with the government. So if you're not filing taxes, or you're not a permanent resident or a citizen or legally residing in the United States, then that might be a different situation, which again would have to be depending on what state you live in. And I would still say that doesn't mean you wouldn't qualify for some level of coverage. It just depends on what your situation is. But just to know that the advanced minimum tax credit requires that you file taxes in the current tax year for you to qualify for that, and that you also are legally present and resident in the United States or a citizen. So those are things that I don't need to emphasize because they are really like, the reason why you would qualify for that in the first place. Now, let's take a look at this from the standpoint of what does this actually do? Or why am I making all this noise? It's really important to know why this is even coming up here. Now, usually you would go on there and just find a plan and pick it and go, right? You've got coverage for the next year. This is important because if you just don't take or pay attention to this, you might actually be paying money for plans that you should not be paying for. You're leaving money on the table, to be very straightforward here. You're basically leaving money on the table that the federal government programs are offering you and you're not using. So again, that is really why this matters at the end of the day. So it's really important that you take a look at those things and make sure that you're making the most of your coverage. The other things that I would like to talk about here is how you go about, finding what plan works best for you. I was just talking about the different levels of coverage that you might find out there, and I'll quite quickly talk about those. There is the bronze plan, which basically is saying that if you find the bronze coverage, you will be taking care of like 60% of the coverage, and the plan will cover like 40%. That's a bronze plan. And that moves to 70/30 if you go to a silver plan level. 70% of the cost is covered and you only take care of the remaining 30%. Or if you're looking at a diamond plan, the diamond plans will usually go up to like 80%, so you only pay 20%. And of course, the platinum, which is not always available in every state, but I think it's still worth mentioning. If you have a platinum, you can see yourself paying just 10% and the plan taking care of up to 90% of the coverage. What is also important to notice here is that this is kind of a trade-off, right? So the higher you pay in premium, the lower your cost sharing would be when you go and use services. So that is really what that is. So if you have a bronze plan, that means when you go out there and try to use coverage or try to get services, try to see doctors, try to see specialists, they will charge you more for out-of-pocket costs. But if you have a platinum plan, for example, it means you pay the least out-of-pocket for those services. So that's really the most important thing to take away from that. Now, if we go back and look at it from the standpoint of what are the things that you need to be careful about when you out there shopping for a plan. The number one aspect I would like you to take a look at is the deductible. If you see any plan, first off, look at what it says the deductible is. So what is a deductible? It's a very simple word, but it means a lot in insurance, especially health insurance language. The deductible simply means that is what you would pay out of your pocket, right? So before the plan ever pays $1, you must have made that amount of payment for them to start paying out of their own share. So basically, if you see a plan that says the deductible is $6,000, it means you must have paid up to $6,000 for the insurance to cover its share of whatever you were going to do. So if you were going to see a doctor and they're charging you $50 copay for the doctor visit, then you would have to pay that $50 until you have met the $6,000. If you had a surgery and they're charging you $3,000, you would have to pay the $3,000 until you've paid up to $6,000, right? That will bring it up to your deductible paid off. Then you are now even, and the insurance tax take care of you. So that is a very important thing to pay attention to. A lot of times people don't realize that, and they see a cheap premium plan and say, "Oh, this is a $0 a month plan. Oh yeah, it's exciting." But guess what? You have that. Um, you're actually on the hook here for a high deductible because that's usually what they will do. There, they will put a high deductible of like 10,000, which means you would have to be paying up to $10,000 before they can even pay a dime to cover you. So be very careful when you look at those things. Another word that you would find a little bit confusing when you're shopping around is the copay. A copay is simply saying, okay, the plan says you would have to pay this amount of money whenever you go for a service. That's typical, like if you go to see your doctor. The doctor office might charge a copay of maybe 10, 50, it just depends on what that office is charging and what the insurance is also covering, right? So the copay is simply what you would pay out of your pocket to cover the cost for that coverage that or that service that you've just received, which is basically saying we're not paying everything. You would also have to pay a part of it, and that's the copay. That's what that is. Copay is that portion that you pay for services that you would receive. Or it's also used in the name of coinsurance. You would hear that quite often. They are pretty much the same thing, interchangeably used. Coinsurance here simply means what you would also pay with your insurance company, right? So that's what that means. You can hear them interchangeably used. They are technically the same thing. Another word that you would find out there that might be confusing when you're shopping for plans is the out of network and in network. So it's something that I would like you to pay attention to as well. They will show you cost based of an in network and cost based of out of network. It's usually just telling you that we do have preferred service providers, and those are the people we will consider to be in our network. That's, for example, the doctors that the insurance companies have signed a contract with to provide services for their members in the insurance plan. They would charge lesser than if you were just going out there and see any other doctor who would charge you more because they are out of that network, right? So in network, out network. Very important thing to pay close attention to. Um, then there is also what I would like to just wrap things up here with on this basic stuff that we need to pay attention to. So let's recap. We've done the deductibles, the co-insurance, the copay, and the in-network and out-of-network. I think those are the main things that is worth paying attention to. I was promising to talk about something that I think might be very important for those who might actually still have insurance through their employer, because I know most of them might not really need this information regarding annual enrollments for Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. But nevertheless, I would just like to talk about why it might be important that you actually do it. Might just depend on your family situation. For example, right? You are actually under an employer plan, but the law says that if that employer plan is costing you more than 8.39% of your income, you qualify to use the Affordable Care Act advanced premium tax credit as modified under the Inflation Reduction Act. So you will be able to say, okay, I would rather not use my employer coverage. I would use the Affordable Care Act and get coverage for my family because they will provide me some subsidy. That is only if you meet those conditions, obviously, right? So let's say, for example, your employer coverage for a family member of four was costing you like $4,000, and that would be more than 8.39% of your income, then you would qualify for those tax credits. That is the situation where you would be saying, okay, I don't want to use this. I want to go onto the marketplace and still shop for something that will be much more affordable for me and get those subsidies. So remember, it's really based on what your income is, and the income in this case is your income, and not just your cost for your coverage individually, right? That includes your family members. So we're talking of you and every other person that you're covering in the coverage in the household. The total cost of that coverage, if it's over 8.39% of your income, you would qualify for advanced premium tax credits and cost sharing reductions. So please make sure you take advantage of that. That's really our hack of the day. And I would like to just reiterate here that even though you might be under the coverage of an employer, that doesn't necessarily mean you do not qualify for advanced premium tax credits, right? Or cost sharing reductions. If you can find out and check the numbers and see that your cost to cover, I say this because I know people with a family of four, for classic example, they will never find coverage anything under $4,000. I can assure you that. Now, if you do go ahead and make that calculation and you know $4,000 is over 8.39% of your income, you sure would be qualifying for the advanced premium tax credits. So do well to use that to your advantage and make sure you get your family covered and take advantage of all those benefits there is out there. And I would leave you guys with one very important note here. I know a lot of times people don't realize this, but the question is, why does your insurance do not cover